Good morning. This is Blaine Pardoe. I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I'm the author and creator of the Land and Sea series, as well as the Blue Dawn series. And this is Writers Fix Problems. Now, we're going to be talking today about a book called Political Prisoner. For full disclosure, I did not purchase this book. Mr. Evans and I share the same publisher, Defiance Press. I asked for a copy to read because we've seen so few books about the events of January 6th, and I thought it'd be good to dive into one. This was a good book. It's only 62 pages long. It made it for a very quick read. I tried on multiple occasions to get Mr. Evans as a guest. He didn't respond to either the publisher or me about that opportunity. No doubt he is busy, and I think his book is important enough to have a discussion or an online review of. So we're going to dive into that, and Watcher, if you have any questions that pop up, along the way, stop me and we'll talk about them.
You got it, boss.
I really enjoyed the book. It was fascinating to go through. Now, look, we've all formed opinions about the events on January 6th. I'm in the camp of saying it was not an insurrection. No one's been charged with that. I don't think you can have an insurrection when no one's actually been charged with that. There's no scenario where Donald Trump would have been named president that day. So to call it an insurrection simply exposes the ignorance of the reality of that day. You don't have unarmed insurrections in today's world either. And I think that the people who fought with the police were wrong to do so at the U.S. Capitol. I also think that people who were ushered into the Capitol were at best misdemeanor trespassers. So that's my position going into this, and this was my perspective. And this book did appeal to me because probably of my preformed beliefs in that area. Now, Mr. Evans isn't some sort of radical extremist as some online have tried to paint him. He was a college football captain, a successful businessman, and a politician. In 2020, he flipped a democratically held seat that had been held for 98 years as a Democratic seat to a Republican seat in the West Virginia House of Delegates. So this is an elected official in the state of West Virginia. Like many of us, he went to bed on election night in 2020 with Trump in the lead, only to wake up and find out Joe Biden had been declared the winner. And he witnessed what I refer to as shenanigans in several of those contests. Like tens of millions of people, he had a lot of questions about the validity of the election results. So he took a bus to D.C. on January 6th to attend a rally about the election. And he was caught up with the crowd that went into the Capitol that day, actually filming some of it on his phone. His footage was edited heavily and put on television nationally. He wasn't there to overthrow the government. He was literally caught up in the crowd. Nor did he experience violence. Now, here's a passage from the book so that you get a little bit of what he experienced as he approached the Capitol. And this is a quote. "I approached a security officer who was keeping a sharp eye on the crowd, but otherwise looked as if it was just like any other day. 'God bless you, sir,' I said. He nodded and gave me a fist bump. 'Everything will be all right. Nobody will get hurt. We will still respect you. It's nothing personal against you,' is what he said, or is what Evans told the guard. The guard nodded again and watched the crowd. So this doesn't sound like a confrontational situation. If anything, you're getting fist bumps from security on the way in. Seems like you're being kind of almost ushered or invited in. He goes on to state that surely none of this was what President Trump had in mind when he shared info about the rally. I know it wasn't. So, his intent wasn't to go down there to overthrow the government. And it wasn't to lead an insurrection to install Donald Trump. It was down there to protest what they felt was an unfair election. Now, Evans got interviewed by the press about being in the Capitol. Obviously, as an elected official from West Virginia, that was going to happen. 2 days after the walking tour he had of the Capitol, 15 to 20 FBI agents showed up at his home and arrested him. This was done in front of his wife and children. This, in my opinion, was an excessive use of force for someone that had not taken part in any of the violence that was there. Why not simply ask him to surrender himself rather than have the media and the authorities show up for a demonstration of police state force? In many respects, his arrest demonstrates how the entire event was packaged and presented to the American people. To me, one of the most telling parts of the book, which should send chills down anyone's spine, is that the feds tried to push him into saying this was all Donald Trump's fault. And he talks about that not at great length, but there are several sentences about that in the book. Rather than simply ask him why he was there, they tried to weave it into their narrative that they were constructing. And I found that infuriating, that they were already preparing their case that this was Donald Trump's fault. What followed for Evans was a year and a half of hell. And he actually has a chapter titled that. The feds offered him a chance to plead down to a misdemeanor, which he was prepared to do. And then they jerked that back, threatening him with 24 years in prison. There's a whole chapter of this book that goes into the wrangling that he had to go through. They finally hit him with a felony charge, obstructing an official proceeding. This infighting and backstabbing that they kind of did with him in this exposes a lot about how this process is being handled and is one of the better parts of the book. I won't ruin everything in the book. Suffice it to say, the feds did jerk him around about where he was going to be in prison to serve his sentence. And I found that really irritating. What emerges is a story about a Department of Justice that is abusing its power to inflict the maximum damage against people it considers are the worst criminals in our nation. Political Prisoner forces you to consider what America is turning into. It forces the reader to get a glimpse inside the, and I'm using quotes here, judicial process that is involved with the people in the protest on January 6th and are having it inflicted upon them. My wording here is very specific. This is being inflicted on these people. What this book exposes is the level of deep state corruption and harassment that many of us have suspected, but is now verified by this book by Mr. Evans. The title of the book is appropriate. It's Political Prisoner. I'm sure Mr. Evans got off lightly given his public profile. It's infuriating to me that there are others still languishing in a DC prison who have not even had a chance to have their cases heard. What is more appalling is that from the very start of this investigation, the effort was underway to implicate Donald Trump in any way possible with the events of that day. As I said before, this is a short book, but it's packed with a lot of importance, and I encourage you to pick it up. That's my quick review, or not so quick review, it's kind of a long one, on Political Prisoner. Watcher, did you have any thoughts as I went through that, or any questions you want to hit me with?
Oh boy. Other than, man, I really need to read this book. No. Unfortunately, I fall in the category of people that have done a lot of research on this topic already. So this all kind of it all sounds in line with many other people who've given
Well,
interviews and that kind of stuff.
we just haven't seen a lot of books come out of this, and,
Correct.
and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are still appealing,
Well,
and maybe they want to put this behind them. They don't want to write
somebody.
books.
Well, look, I this is probably a wise thing that I need to get through my head. Somebody said this the other day, and they were like, it's only old news if the plebs haven't heard it yet, or it's only old news if the plebs have already heard it, and they haven't. So, um, it's
Well, I see Liz Cheney's put out a book on her interpretation. I don't think I'll be able to get her on the show though.
no, I'm not sure if I could stomach that. Yeah, when I was looking for the cover for this one, I noticed that she's got one, and what's her name? The hyper Trump deranged one that hosts the MSNBC show, Maddow,
Oh yeah,
also has her own shockingly terrible looking book as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
I guess what I came away with was I think the people of West Virginia are well served by this person because he didn't come in and say, "Look, I'm denying I was there." He didn't, dig his heels in and slug it out against the legal system that was clearly stacked against him. He owned up to it, and he's very blunt about that in his book as well as his religious conviction. He said, "Yeah, I was in the Capitol that day, and I'm not ashamed of that." And he owned up to it, but the jerking around they did with him, they told him they were going to send him to some minimum security prison. It made it sound like one of those country club type places, and they didn't send him there. They sent him someplace else, and they're doing this very deliberately. And it's scary to see this happen in our country that we're not seeing justice here. This isn't justice. You know, for a trespassing event, you got to be kidding me. And how did he obstruct an official proceeding without actually being at the proceeding? But he owned up to that. That became the charge they finally settled on. And it sounded like they were just dealing out these charges like out of a deck of cards, for what they were going to hit him with. It's really depressing. He spent his time in jail. He owned up to it and is still doing his duties, after he got out. But he's now technically a criminal.
yeah. There's a lot of things about that are incredibly disheartening. The largest of which is that it's the same tactic that they take as per large, which is just, yes, we're going to do a very clearly illegal and wrong thing, but it's going to take you years to fight it if you're ever able to successfully fight it at all. And we have the entire power of the state backing us, which is, as we know, a millstone that grinds very slowly yet very fine. Um, yeah, it's unbelievably sinister.
It,
And if they'll destroy an elected representative, uh, what chance do any of us have? Hey,
yeah, I think it's a great question. I really, it was disheartening to go through this book and to see that this is somebody who is an elected official, and the amount of jerking around they did with him, there was very little respect for the fact that he hadn't done anything wrong, and had the video evidence. I mean, the guy brought the receipts to
yeah,
prove what he said, um, and it didn't matter to them. What mattered was the retribution, and it's a little shocking to go through that as you read it. Even though it's a short book, you start going, I feel terrible about this. And I think he did a good job. It's one of those things of how do you write a book about something like this? I think he kept it short, probably, because it makes it easy. He didn't delve into a lot of the Ashley Babbitt stuff. He didn't delve into a lot of the stuff that happened prior to his arrival up at the Capitol, which was violent in some cases. But we're seeing now with the release of the footage from January 6th that a lot of what he put in this book is being validated, very much so, to the point where you start going, now I need to start questioning what the actual story is here. Do we have any comments or questions that we need to hit on?
We don't yet, but that's a good call for one, audience. If you have anything that you wanted to ask before we head out, this is going to be a short one because we unfortunately the author was a little too busy being an elected representative and also taking care of all this stuff, the trailing effects, to join us today.
Now, next week, we'll talk about who we're having on.
Yeah, so next week we've got a YouTuber and now author whom I've actually been a fan of for quite a while now, Mage Leader.
Yeah, he's done a Western, which is cool.
Yeah.
I read it. It's his first book. And you're probably wondering, well, why aren't you bringing in bigger name writers? I like talking to writers that are just starting, as well as people who are out there and experienced. I think it's great when you talk to a new writer, especially about their book. It was a fun read. It really read like a Clint Eastwood Western in many respects. I think the Western genre is very much an American genre, and it's something that's a lot of fun to engage with. So we're going to have Mage Leader on. We're going to talk about his book next week. I definitely recommend you pick it up if you haven't already.
It's called "And Hell Followed with Him" by Mage Leader. Now, real quick, not so much a question, but it is a comment from earlier that I figured I'd share. VB over on YouTube says, "Hey guys, Blaine, I know you're talking about this book, but I just finished book 3 of Land and Sea. Great work."
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I never plug my own books. I got to figure out a way to interview myself on this channel. But yeah, it's been a great ride so far. This book is worth picking up if you're into, I would almost call this true crime in some respect. But this is a real life political thriller. But I've definitely been having fun doing the Land and Sea series. So thank you for your comment.
All right. That's about it, other than people just saying hi.
All right. Well, folks, next week we're going to be talking cowboys and shoot ups and bad guys, and it's going to be a fun time. And I recommend you take a look at Mage Leader's new book. You're going to really enjoy it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Make sure you give us a like and a subscribe wherever you're at, and we'll see you again next week.